الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. As we continue this chapter about a great Imam Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Hajar al-Asqalani المتوفى سنة 856, the one who died 856 after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. In his book entitled Buloogh al-Maraam, Obtaining the Objective, where the time now is 7:30, I think it's approximately 7:30, Saturday, August the 3rd, 2024, the Gregorian calendar, which agrees on the Islamic date, which is the date of Ahl al-Islam. For the people, now it's currently the evening of Saturday, Yom Sabt al-Sabt, 28th of Muharram, the year Aam 1446, the year 1446, after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. We continue in the different types of invalid marriages in Islam. We talked about the affair pertaining to a zani, the one who falls into fornication, and the affair pertaining to a majlood. As it says in the narration, majlood. And we said that the actual meaning of the word majlood is not necessarily one who is lashed. But majlood was emphasis for the one in which the fact of the affair pertaining to fornication has been clearly established. So we spoke about that matter in the explanation in regards to it, clarifying the matters that's connected or correlates with it. And we said that the matter, before we move on to the last narration in this particular affair, but it said the marriage that's invalid in Islam is to marry a afif to a zani, or a afifa to a zani. For a man, it's been clearly established that they fornicated, that they're not to be married off to a chaste individual or chaste woman. And likewise, vice versa. As al-afifa, or chaste woman, who's not known at all to violate her chastity by falling into fornication, is not to be, like we said, married to a man that's known for that type of affair of fornicating within the society. And we said that this narration establishes that the marriage is invalid if one does so. We also talked about the details of that, and there's more to that, but return back to the recording from last week, inshallah, to attain it. So as we move on, everyone, the next narration, this is where we finalized the types of invalid marriages in Islam. The narration of our mother, Aisha, radiallahu anha, قالت طلق رجل امرأته ثلاثا فتزوجها رجل ثم طلقها قبل أن يدخل بها فأراد زوجها الأول أن يتزوجها فسئل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن ذلك فقال لا حتى يذوق الآخر من عسيلتها ما ذاق الأول. This is the narration where we stopped last class. On the authority of our mother, Aisha radiallahu anha, it says that a man divorced his wife 3. We'll talk about the meaning of 3. It does not mean that he pronounced divorce on her 3 times in one sitting. That's not the meaning, as we'll explain. It says, after that, another man married her. Another man married her. Then he divorced her before it was consummated. I mean, before he entered her, and we know that means basically intimacy, and before it had taken place. So he divorced her before he consummated with her. Is it clear, everyone? It says, for the first husband, meaning the former, wanted to marry her again. Is it clear, Sheikh Sharif? You with me? He says, so the former husband wanted to remarry her. So it was asked the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam about that. What did it say? فَقَالْ لَا حَتَّى يَذُوقَ الْآخَرُ مِنْ عُسَيْلَتِهَا مَا ذَاقَ الْأَوَّلِ. As it says in the narration. It was asked the Messenger of Allah about that. He says, no. He says, until the latter husband, meaning the one she's married to now, that he tastes from her honey of what the first had tasted. This narration is in Bukhari Muslim, agreed upon. But the wording is for the great Imam Muslim in the Sahih. So this narration, like we know, is authentic. And like la ghubara alayh min haythu sihhatiha. طيب. So that's the narration we want to cover today. So you'll find that from the affairs pertaining to divorce, and what we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, what did we say, everyone? We said the affair pertaining to when a man divorces his wife, and the correct way of divorcing her, of course. And we talked that what is permissible in Islam if a man wanted to divorce his wife, and that these affairs have their protocol. It's not just something that is chaotic, and he can say whenever he feels like it, and that whenever there's some type of marital discord, to just conducting it in a manner that is unacceptable. There's a decorum and there's a protocol of how to divorce your wife that one has to follow. The affair pertaining to divorce, like we said 2 weeks ago, we said number one, that the divorce would be, of course, the last option, and maintain, of course, family ties as long as there is cohesion and both couples can coexist in the house. That's always what's preferable. And if both are satisfied with each other, just a little mishap or something might have flared up, but reconciliation is possible. Of course, we know that that's always what's the first option. And we know the steps that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in clarity in this regard of how to rectify certain types of marital discord and the things of that nature. Right, everyone? So those affairs are clear. So we have that. As we know, that is also beloved to the devil. The devil loves to separate between a wife and a husband. Why? Because it destroys the society and it makes the structure within society weak because it's based upon a weak family structure. And any society with a weak family structure is doomed to fail. So those type of affairs, like we said, even the shaitan knows that. He knows that affair and he knows that reality. That's why, as it comes in the narration, that the jinn that separated between a husband and a wife, he brings them close and say, you're the one, anta, you're the one. Meaning you did the best. You did the best mischief. You did the best act of corruption. So those type of affairs, like we said, everyone, divorce is always the last option. If there isn't any type of possibility of reconciliation, and there cannot be any cohesion or the two couples can't coexist, then of course, then the affair were not like to the extremes of the Catholics or some of the people, from the people of the book, where they say there is no such thing as divorce, don't do it at all, even though both couples are unhappy with their situation. But like we said, Islam is a moderate, in the middle course, it is the best of moderation and approach to matters and how to deal with them. So we know at the end, divorce is the last option. If possible, it's the last option. If a man now divorces his wife, we know there's a protocol to it. One cannot just jump to conclusions and be hasty. And based upon his anger, he just immediately utters the statement of divorce. So we know that it only could be at a time where he was not intimate with her and at a time where she's not on her meds. So that's the first thing. So a woman has to be in a state of tuhur, purification, and it cannot be in a time frame where he was intimate with her. So he has to wait until her meds comes on, it goes off, and then he pronounces one talaq, one love or wording of talaq. He says that she's taliq. That's it. That's it. We know there are statements that necessitates what they call kinaya anit talaq. Words that necessitate divorce. We'll get into that later. Like for example, if you eat that fruit, you're free from me, or I'm free from you. And you're intended by divorce, it counts. But the proper way to say it is she is divorced, or you are divorced. That's all you would say. Just one time. You would say, Enti taliq. You are divorced. That is the proper way to divorce. And that's it. You don't utter anything other than that. If you say that, now she has to do an iddah. She has to do what they call a waiting period. A waiting period where now you will wait until her next ments go on. And it goes off. And if you want, you can say to her, Anti or ana raja'tuki. I take you back. And ana raja'tuki. Raja'tuki. Not raja'tu ilayki. Raja'tuki. So a person would say, I take you back. Or in English, of course, he would say, I'll take you back. Then after that, if they now have reconciled and sorted out their matters or any type of affair that caused marital discord between themselves, then of course, then they resume. Within that time frame, of course, then we know once he takes her back, that counts as what? One divorce. That counts as one divorce. That type of divorce, as we know, is called what? Al-talaq al-raj'i. I'm sorry. It's called al-talaq al-raj'i. Al-talaq al-raj'i. Al-talaq al-raj'i. Raj'i meaning he could take her back. That only counts for the first divorce and the what, everyone? Second, only. The third divorce is called al-talaq al-ba'in. Al-ba'in. Meaning now she's not your wife anymore. So now it's over. The relationship is over. So you have the option for what? The first. If it's the last option to resolve the matter, and like we said, that divorce, this is how one would what, everyone? Do it in a proper way. So if he was just intimate with her last night, you cannot just jump the gun and be hasty and divorce your wife immediately. So you will have to wait until what? Her menstruation goes on and go off without you being intimate with her. Is it clear? No type or form of intimacy at all. At all. So after that, when her menstruation goes on and off, he says again, Anti taliq. Anti taliq. That's all you would say. You are divorced. Once you utter that, the iddah starts. So that's one divorce. And similar to that is the second. If one did it again, if he took her back, let's say raja'tuki, or we'll talk about the different types that would necessitate that you had taken her back, such as touching her, or kissing her, or hugging her. And intimacy is without a shadow of a doubt you took her back. Is it clear, everyone? Similar to that is the second type of divorce. Is it clear? One to do the exact same thing as the what? The first. If you do that, both of those type of divorces, the first and the second, are called al-talaq al-raj'i. Meaning, that's still your wife technically, but you have the option to what? Take her back. The third is the final one. It's not called talaq al-raj'i anymore. It's called talaq what, everyone? Al-ba'in. Al-ba'in. Where she's now not your wife anymore, and the divorce is what? Finalized. In that instance, after the third divorce, she cannot remarry you until she marries another man. Is it clear? She cannot remarry you now after the third divorce, al-talaq al-ba'in, until she tastes the honey of another man. And that affair is pertaining to what they call, it has to be nikah al-raghba. Nikah al-raghba. Meaning she married another man where she's interested in staying with that what? With that next marriage, with that next man. Her intent cannot be to what? Go back to her former husband. It has to be, we gave the conditions of that a couple of weeks ago, right, everyone? We talked about that. It has to, the great Imam Ibn Uthaymeen, he mentioned in his explanation, what did he say? Number one, the first condition is what? It has to be a valid marriage. In order for the wife to return back to the former husband, it has to, number one, be a marriage that's valid. And we talked about that, right? It has to be in a marriage that's valid. That's number one. For example, she married a husband or a man and found out that she was related to him by breastfeeding, let's just say. By rada'a. That marriage is what? Invalid. Based upon that, she cannot return back to him yet. So it has to be in a marriage. Or another example, I think that was a poor example. A better example than that, even though it's correct, but give a little bit more what's prevalent in these days. She married a man without a wali. That's more common. Let's just say she married a man without a wali. Is the marriage valid? No. We know, as the narration says, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, "La nikaha illa biwali wa shahidain adlain." There's no nikah except by wali and two upright 5-day praying Muslims. Is it clear, everyone? And also two upright 5-day praying Muslims. طيب. So, if the sister now embarks upon a new marriage with another man, and if we found out that she married the new man, or the new brother rather, without a what? Wali, can she now go back to the former husband? Why? Why, everyone? The marriage is invalid. Nikah was already sahih. The marriage was invalid. So based upon that, she cannot return back to him what? Back to him yet. Why? Because the marriage is invalid. Like, another example, she married him without the new husband. Married him without two upright 5-day praying Muslim men. And we found out the marriage is what? Invalid. Marriage is invalid. Can she go back to him yet? No. So that was the first condition. The first condition is what again? It has to be in a marriage that's what? Valid. It has to be in nikah that's valid. So that's the first prerequisite, if she wanted to return back to the former husband. The second one, as we mentioned last class, was what? It has to be nikah al-raghba. Nikah al-raghba. Meaning a marriage that she was interested clearly, internally, in her niyyah and her intention to remain with that new husband. Not in the back of her mind that I have ulterior motive, that I'm marrying this man just to what? Get back with my first one. Is it clear? So that is the other prerequisite that has to be fulfilled to return back to the former husband. So she has to embark upon a new marriage where she knows clearly within her heart and in the motives that she has within herself, or that she's concealing, that I'm trying to stay with that new husband. And she's not playing games where she's just marrying him for what? To return back to the former husband. So it has to be called nikah al-raghba, where she's interested in remaining with that new husband. So let's just say it didn't work out with the new husband that she intended. Of course, her intentions were clear within herself that I wanted it to work out, but it didn't work out. So that's what this hadith applies to. You're looking at it in your books. You see, everyone? When you're looking at it in your books, that is what the hadith applies to this predicament here that's mentioned in the narration in front of us. You see it? You see it? Oh, you don't have it?
No,
it's in there. It's in there. Here, let me have it too. I'll have to look at it later, inshallah. I'll have to look at it a little bit later, inshallah. It's in here though, but I'll just have to look at it. But right now we're in the middle of class. We'll talk about it later. Just share right now. Just share. Just share right now. Just share one of the neighbors. Share one of the brothers for now. And then I'll give it to you after the class because we got to continue. So what we mentioned is that the affair that's just say now, the hadith is speaking about that predicament. Is it clear, everyone? So what it says in the narration, طَلَّقَ رَجُلٌ إِمْرَأَتَهُ ثَلَاثًا. So it says now, a man divorced his wife 3 times, meaning 3 separate what? Divorces. Not pronouncing it 3 times in one sitting by saying anti taliq, anti taliq, anti taliq. You're divorced, you're divorced, you're divorced. You cannot but do that. Is it clear, everyone? What it's saying here in the hadith, it was intended by he divorced her 3 separate occasions. So that's what it means. 3 separate occasions, not saying he divorced her 3 times with one word. Is it clear? So let's keep going. So it says the man married her. Then he divorced her before he consummated. قَبْلَ أَن يَدْخُلَ بِهَا. So the first husband came forward, or the former came to marry her again. فسئل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن ذلك فقال لا حتى يذوق الآخر من عسيلتها ما ذاق الأول. He says no. So the Messenger of Allah was asked about that. He said no until the latter, that he tastes from her honey of what the first tasted, meaning the former husband. Is it clear, everyone? So that is to put in perspective this hukum, this ruling, which is what? You'll find Ahl Ilm that they say about this, that أن المرأة المطلقة ثلاثا لا يحل لمطلقها أن يتزوجها إلا بعد أن تتزوج بزوج آخر. زواج رغبة لا زواج تحليل. ثم يطلقها وتنتهي عدتها عند ذلك. يستطيع زوجها الأول أن يتزوجها، لكن لو جاء واحد وعقد عليها عقدا صحيحا وليس عنده نية تحليل ولا تحيل وكان له رغبة لكن طلقها قبل أن يطأها فإنها لا تحل له, because this hadith which we'll talk about right now, where it says that a woman has been divorced 3 times or 3 separate occasions, that's not permissible or lawful for her to return back to the former husband until, like we said, she marries another man, that zawaj, which is called zawaj raghba. We just mentioned what that means, right? Not zawaj of making herself halal for her former husband. What it says in the wording, zawaj tahleel. We just talked about that affair is what everyone cursed. This is the Prophet sallallahu la'ana Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam al-muhallil wal-muhallila lah. So you find al-muhallila lah, as we talked about the narration. He said that the Messenger of Allah cursed the man or to curse the couples or the gatherers or the group of people that partake in this, what they call tahleel. The man who makes the wife halal for the former one. Is it clear? So those type of affairs, it says, if it takes place for a man now divorces his wife and the iddah is over. If that's the case where that a matter was not pertaining to those type of what? Tricks of what they call nikah tahleel. If that's not the case, and let's just say now that this happened, then now he can what? The former husband can marry and she can return back to her what? Former husband. But it cannot be in a manner where they're playing games, or they're trying to play tricks, or they have ulterior motives, or they have some type of what? Desire within themselves to get back together. And then they partake in an affair where they what? Conspire, or they're co-conspirators in this regard to actualize their ulterior motives in order to make her so-called halal for the first husband or the former. However, the affair which the Messenger of Allah is establishing, everyone, is that she cannot return back to him from the prerequisites, along with what we mentioned, is that there has to be some type of what? Consummation. So that's what the Messenger of Allah was establishing here. So she cannot return back to the former in this narration, as we mentioned. And like we said, everyone, based upon the fact that the Messenger of Allah established this affair of what? Consummation. So it has to be a valid marriage. So if you want to add on the third, we could say. So we said number 1 has to be a valid marriage. Number 2, it has to be a marriage where she desires to remain with him without any what? Ulterior motives, to go back to the former husband. And the third, the Messenger of Allah is saying here, stop playing with your pants, bad manners. And the third is what, everyone? What's the third prerequisite?
You gotta have sexual intercourse.
There has to be intercourse. So there has to be what again? It has to be intimacy. Intimacy. So that is the other prerequisite along with the others we mentioned. Is it clear? Get jaded. So you notice the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said until he tastes from her honey, al-usayla. A person might say, is that pertaining to mujarrad, just mere ejaculation, or is it just mere what? Intimacy. Does ejaculation have to take place? What is correct is just what? It's mere intimacy. Whether some type of ejaculation takes place or not. The affair only revolves around what, everyone? Mere what? Intimacy. Good. Even if, let's just say, ejaculation or what have you did not take place, mean ejaculated sperm or whatever, or pre-seminal discharge or semen. The point of the matter is what, everyone? Intercourse, and that's it. Good. So, that is the matter that we wanted to establish. The Messenger of Allah used words that were kind of exquisite. So the Messenger of Allah did not give an affair that was so blatant, but he wanted to make the matter, of course, with some type of form of honor, chivalry. So he used the word Usayla. Usayla takes from her, and we know the word Usayla is tasghir for the word what? Asal. Asal in the Arabic language means honey. Means honey. And the Messenger of Allah used what they call the smaller wazn or scale in the Arabic language, such as the word Usayla. Usayla, which is the lesser word of the Usayla, meaning the small type of honey, but it means the same thing. So, notice he used that word, and he established this matter as we just said. So, all of the scholars of fiqh in regards to this hadith, and when they explained it, they mentioned it says something important. They said, هل العبرة بنية الزوجة وبنية الزوج وبنية الولي. قال الفقهاء من لا فرق بيده لا أثر لنيته وعلى هذا في المرجع لنية الزوج. هل is the affair pertaining to the intention of the wife, the intention of the wali? Everyone has to have their intentions pure in this regard. That they're trying to seek the face of Allah, and they do not have any hidden ulterior motives. So that's in that regard to establish that this matter is is from those matters that one has to now take in consideration and do things correctly in order for things now to be a good outcome, and not to try to do something hidden and something evil and corrupt with a corrupt intention, thinking that you're trying to attain your objective, but in actuality, you're going to lose out. And who knows? As we know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who's in control of of the hearts ultimately. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that's in control of the hearts. And who knows? Allah might remove something of the heart of the individual. For we know that evil brings about an evil outcome. As we know, al-jaza' min jins al-amal. The repayment is due to the type of action you've done. So one should now embark upon what's correct in order to have the best outcome. But who knows, like we said, you try to now evolve into this cursed act of now having an ulterior motive to marry, to make now the wife lawful for the former husband. And what might come as a result of it? Okay, they go back. Let's just say she goes back to the former husband after one is indulged in something evil. Allah might not bless your marriage again. So the same thing that led you down the same road, who's to say that it might not happen again? So that's the reason why the mu'min, Buloogh al-Maraam, irda rabbih. What the mu'min always sets out is to please his Lord. Never to attain self-gratification for himself, but to always please his Lord first and to put that as a priority before everything else. And that a person never tries to set out with a corrupt method to attain what he wants, or an evil way to attain what he wants. Because like we said, that outcome, what you're looking for, still might be reprehensible and evil and deplorable as a result of not taking the proper method to now attain it. So, like we said, the message of Allah made these affairs clear. So that's the reason why we always tell, and we remind ourselves that piety, victory will be for those who are pious and those who adhere to it. So that's the bughya of the mu'min in all times. So that's what we wanted to mention in this regard about this particular narration. There's something else before we move on, everyone. Before we move on, just give me 1 second. Before we move on about this hadith, about some examples that was given from Ahl Ilm about this particular matter. And then we'll move on to the next narration. I'm sorry, you had a question?
What if a woman doesn't have a
menstruation. But she doesn't have a mens. She doesn't have a mens at all, or is it irregular? Okay. If a woman doesn't get a mens at all, I'm talking about at all, and she doesn't have any mens at all. I'm not talking about an irregular mens. Certain women have irregular mens. It might be, let's just say, some women might have a mens 3 times a year. If she has a mens 3 times a year, then the ibrah, what's taken consideration, is still with the mens. Doesn't matter. Person say, so I have to wait all the way up to when my mens comes on? Yes. And a man might say the same thing. I have to wait till her mens? Yes. As long as she has a mens, you have to what? You have to wait. If she does not have a mens at all, let's just say, due to the fact that she had a hysterectomy, that's a type of operation where her ovaries or what have you was extracted or something to that effect. As the reproductive organs were extracted due to some type of fissures or what have you, or tumors or what have you within the reproductive organs. In that instance, you'll find that women that usually have that type of operation, they don't have a mens at all. Or a younger female or an older female, one that's elderly. Some of them don't have a mens at all. If that's the case, then that's when you'll go by what? 30 days. 30 days. But the condition for using the number method of 30 days is based upon the fact that she does not have a mens at all. Not the fact that it's irregular. And some people, they mix it up. They say, well, it's irregular, so I'm counting 30 days. That's still incorrect. The affair of counting 30 days is only for what, everyone? She doesn't have a mens at all, due to all the different types of factors that we just mentioned. For example, she's either a young wife, or an elderly wife, or she has some type of surgery. She does have some type of what? Surgery. So based upon that, in that instance, then that's when you count what? 30 days. Jiggy, is that the question? Fine. So let's keep going. So also the origin is أن النية نية الزوج. لكن القول بأنه يرجع إلى نية الزوجة قول قوي جدا. إن الطلاق كان على عهد النبي الثلاث واحدة. Someone would say in regards to what, everyone, saying you're divorced 3 times in one sitting. Number one should not do that at all. And one does not want to expose himself to ikhtilaf, whether or not he knows his wife is his wife or not. And you'll find that there are fatwa from, or there are statements from Umar al-Khattab, radiyallahu anhu, where a man did that during his time, and he struck him and said, your wife is also free from you now. You should have kept your temper controlled by saying that you married her, or you divorced her 3 times within one wording. So that's the thing that I want everyone to take consideration. Don't do that. Stay away from it. Because now you're going to open the door of khilaf to yourself. You don't want to expose yourself to those type of affairs. Is it clear, everyone? Especially in regards to here in the West. Because we're real stern against brothers that now want to utilize these affairs for their own type of a way or adjustment or their own desires. For example, we heard different types of instances where men divorced their wife while they're on their mens. Or divorced their wife where they were just intimate with them. Those affairs are all impermissible. And like we said, it can also expose one that if it was in the courts or the authorities in an Islamic country, one could get a punishment for that. They could get a punishment. It's a sin to do that. So based upon that, do not expose yourself to those type of matters. Like we said, where you mentioned this word, you're divorced 3 times within one sitting. Where you expose yourself now to khilaf. You don't want to take your risk on your marriage. When you now love your wife, and then maybe you divorced her, now you have to deal with the fact that another man is going to touch your wife that you love. You don't want to do that to yourself. Because certain men out there, they can't deal with it. It probably would drive them crazy, just the mere thought of it. But just to instance, take your consideration before your emotions get the best of you. Is it clear, everyone? So those are the matters we want to take into consideration, because these affairs are very severe. And in addition, don't let the shaitan play with your mind. Especially these days and times. We live in times where it seems like the devil is in men's minds in regards to their marriages and their families. And it's prevalent everywhere. where you'll find, like we said, he's in the minds of people and in their heads, gassing their heads up until they explode. And then find out it wasn't even like that. And if sit and discuss it, they might laugh about it. And just be like, oh, I didn't think that. Oh, you said that? No, I didn't hear that. Oh, my son misunderstood. Things happen. Things happen. Certain people hear certain things. And based upon that, like we mentioned and said, everyone, like we mentioned and said, those matters are all to be what? To be taken consideration and what to be on guard against. Don't forget to pray to the cats. Even if you got to pray in the chair, pray in the chair.
That's all right. I'm okay.
Okay. Yeah, I still, Prophet Sallallahu said to pray to that cats for you sit in the masjid.
I'm just 50. I ain't that old. I'm okay.
I'm telling you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Fine. So we since mentioned to everyone. So we said in this regard, فَأَخْذَ الْعُلَمَاء فَكَانَ جِمَاعًا. So that's the thing that we wanted to mention about the three wording. So let's move on to the next. Anything before we move on to the next chapter?
No, that was very clear.
It's clear? طيب. باب الكفاءة. So let's move on to the next chapter, everyone. باب الكفاءة والخيار. The chapter of adequacy and choice of marriage. So before we move on, everyone, all the different invalid marriages were mentioned in that order. So we just covered all the different types of invalid marriages. If you look in the book, and you look in the chapter, if you go back a bit, what you'll find. For example, let's just go back here to this particular narration. For example, the narration where it says, upon Abu Hurairah, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يجمع بين المرأة وعمتها ولا بين المرأة وخالتها. Hadith muttafaqun alayh. It's not gathered between a woman and her paternal aunt, nor a woman or a sister and her what? Maternal aunt. If a man does that, gather between both, we know that marriage is what, everyone? It's invalid. Is it clear? We talked about that. Or, for example, the narration speaking about لا ينكح المحرم ولا ينكح. That the muhrim, the person that's in Hajj or Umrah, he's considered what again? A muhrim. When he's in that state, he's not the what? He can't marry anyone off, nor what? Nor marry. And in another narration, as we mentioned, it said, وَلَا يَخْطُبْ. Nor can he embark upon a marital engagement either. So just the mere fact of speaking about a marital engagement, and we said from the wisdoms behind that is not to be preoccupied from worship. Because we know during the time of Hajj and Umrah, that's devotion for what? Worship. And we know usually marriage or embarking upon marriage makes one preoccupied from what's more important at that particular time. So when a person embarks upon Hajj, Umrah, those affairs, especially these days, are very expensive. A person saves up their money to travel, remote place, and perform worship and devote in it. For now, a person that comes usually offers marriage, his mind becomes what, everyone? Preoccupied. He starts to think about it. When in that particular instance, one should have their mind clear and focused for what? For worship. So that was the wisdoms of why the Messenger of Allah made that affair unlawful. That's from some of the wisdoms. But that is also an affair that we mentioned and said that Ahl Ilm mentioned by saying if one does it, the marriage is also what? If they marry, of course. If they marry. But all those affairs are prohibited. The affairs during those occasions are prohibited. Also the narration, we covered, let's keep going. Also the narration of Uqbah ibn Amir, if you go back a couple of hadith before. It says the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wassalam, إِنَّا أَحَقُّ الشُّرُوطِ أَن يُوَفَّى بِهِ مَا اسْتَحْلَلْتُمْ بِهِ الْفُرُوجِ. Verily the most deserving of conditions to be fulfilled is what made the private parts lawful. So we talked about the conditions of what, everyone? Of marriage to make it valid, and the marriage and the conditions that's in the marriage contract. We talked about the differences, right? We talked about that. And we said that anything for the maslahah or the benefit of one of the two parties, they can make it a stipulation in the contract. If it's something that's beneficial. And we talked about these examples, right, everyone? We said, for example, a woman might say, or a sister might say, I'll marry you, but for the first 3 months of the marriage, let's just say, for example, I want to stay in my mom's service because she has cancer, for example. So I don't want to leave the house. I want to be by my mother's side, aiding her for the first 3 months in the marriage. Or the 4 months. I'm just giving an example. If the husband agrees, of course, he has to what? Fulfill it. He has to fulfill it. So those are what they call al-shurut fi nikah. Those are called conditions in the marriage contract. Or, for example, before I move out, or I don't want to move in with you immediately if we marry, I would like to wait a year. I want to stay with my family because I haven't been in the presence of anyone else. So me moving in with another man immediately would be a shock to me. I've been living under my father's care since I've been born. So I would like to do it gradually. You understand? I would like to do it gradually. Because I'm nervous, I'm shy, and I want to get just acclimated to it gradually. If she makes that a condition, then of course he has to what? Abide by it, and he has to fulfill it and accommodate her in that. And similar to that, vice versa. A man might say, okay, if I marry you, if we marry, I would like, for example, let's just say for the first couple of months or 3 months, I would like for you we just stay in our own homes. You stay in your house, I stay in my house. I just want to see if we could be what? If we could coexist first before we move in with each other. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? You can mention that. You can make that a condition. Before you move in, or before we move in together, I would like to say, let's just say, for example, the first 6 months of the marriage, everyone stays where they are. Is it clear? You understand? Yes, you can. You can make that a condition. There's nothing wrong with that. Oh, he was laughing?
No, I'm sorry. No, I was just thinking. So no honey. You don't get to take. No honey.
No, you can. Yeah, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. You talk about intimacy?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Unless you make that a condition also. Unless you make that a condition. If you say, for example, the first 2 months, I would like to not have any intimacy until, let's just say, the first month. Or the first couple of months. You can make that a condition. You want to, you can make it a condition. You understand? Yes, you can. If they agree, there has to be what? Have to abide by it. Like, I want to just get to know you a little more until we consummate. Or, like I said, before we move in, I would like to just see if we will coexist, and then what? I'll marry you. I'll move in with you. I'll move in. But I just want to see if we can get along the first couple of months. Because how many situations have we heard that men move in or a woman moves in with him, and then a month later, they don't get along, they can't coexist, divorce. Now she's out of a place. And she has children from another man. And now the previous husband that has kids by her, he wants to know who's this man that's around my children. And are those children now going to come what? With me into my home based upon the fact that she remarried. So all those things have to be what? Taken consideration. So now can you imagine a woman marries a man, her ex-husband, he gets his kids. Marries a new husband. Find out a month later it doesn't what? It's not works out. And she moved to another what? City. So now she has to move to back to her old city, find a new job, find a new place to live, and all those other different types of inconveniences. It doesn't make any sense. And likewise for the man. Same thing. Well, move in with me. So now the man cancels out his apartment or whatever where he lives at. Moves in. They find out 2 months later they don't what? Get along. They can't coexist. So now it causes a hardship on the man. Now I have to move out, find another place to live, and all these other different types of inconveniences that people don't have time for. Is it clear? I got you. Is it clear? So those type of conditions can be made in the marriage contract, and if the person tries to renege and shows that they're not comfortable with it, then by all means they have the grounds for what? For divorce. Because those conditions, the Messenger of Allah said it clearly. What did he say? Verily the most deserving of those conditions to be fulfilled is what made the private parts what? Lawful. So if a person doesn't abide to the condition that you made within the marriage contract for their benefit, then they have the grounds for what? They have the grounds for divorce. Is it clear? So we mentioned and said those are the different types of narrations we covered within the lesson. Is it clear, everyone? So, conditions in the marriage contract can be made. So, the knowledge of this matter removes a lot of hardships from a lot of people who have different circumstances, especially these days. And a lot of people lack the knowledge of this, but now, due to the fact that we mention it, one can mention it in the contract and make it a stipulation by saying that, for example, I would like to finish school before I devote as a full-time wife. I have 1 year, let's just say, for example, I have 1 year school online, and I would like to complete my education before I'm devoted as a full-time wife. If she makes that condition, the husband has to what? Abide it. You have to fulfill it. You can't say now, you agree in a marriage contract, and then when you marry, you start now in your actions, you see something else being applied. Why can't you cook for me? Why can't you be in the house at this certain time? Why is it? You just agreed that you was going to allow me to what? Finish my education. Online, and that I told you, obviously you can't take it. You know, we devote to the time of how we can be both accommodated, and we settle on it. But if you feel that you can't do it, you have to say it. You can't agree to something now, and once you're now in the predicament, you start to renege. He's good. He's good. He's good. All right. We went for the prayer. Oh, okay. No, based upon that, you'll find that those type of matters, if they take place, if the person now shows that they can't take it, then now they have the option of what? They have the option in the ground now for divorce, due to the fact that the person agreed with it. He agreed to the condition. So all of those different conditions can be made within the marriage contract. And once one agrees to it, they have to what? Adhere to it. They have to fulfill it. And from the greatest traits of a Muslim is that they fulfill their what? Their word that they agree to. And if a person feels when they're in a situation they can't take it, or they can't adhere to it, then they release themselves and they free themselves. Or they go about parting ways in that which is best. They part ways in that which is what we want. That which is best. Like, so let's keep going. The other narration we talked about, for example, the affair of temporary marriage. We talked about that also. Right, everyone? We said that marriage also is what in Islam? It's invalid. Temporary marriage is invalid if the time frame is clearly stated in the contract. It's clearly stated in the contract, I want to marry you only for 3 months, or 1 year, or 2 years. Those affairs that so-called mentioned in this way invalidates the marriage. The marriage is not valid at all. It's called zawaj al-mut'ah. Based upon that, the prohibition from the Messenger of Allah in this narration necessitates the invalidity of the what? Of the marriage contract. Is it clear? Also, we talked about nikah al-tahleel, al-muhallil wal-muhallal lah. As the Messenger of Allah cursed the man who makes his wife lawful for the former husband, and the muhallal lah, and the one that was made lawful for him. But we talked about generally in the narration, if all of them co-conspire upon this affair, will all of them partake in it, or some of them, or one of them, or whatever it is, they fall under the curse. Anyone that has that ulterior motive within their intention to do that, whether it be 1, 2, or 3 people, if they all have this within their intention to do it, in the back of your mind, this is what you're trying to do, then that person falls under the what? Under the curse of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the intention, like we said, the affair goes back to that, and one is not to now mess up their affair by a corrupt intention. Is it clear? And like we said, it will mess up the outcome of what you're seeking. If you do it right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring forth the best outcome for everyone. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. And before we mention the last one, the last narration we covered is what? لا ينكح المجلود إلا مثله. That the fornicating man or the fornicating person that was lashed, and we talked about this already, the meaning of the word majlud. It doesn't necessarily mean he or she was what? Lashed. As we said that. The meaning here in the hadith is that it was clearly established that that person fell into what? A zina. They fell into zina. And based upon that, It's not permissible to marry a chaste man off to a who? A fornicating woman that's known that what she's involved in. Until they what? Until what, everyone? Until it's established they made what? Tawbah. Until they made Tawbah. They made Tawbah and it's been established clearly, then they can marry or they can marry each other. Or that chaste man can marry that woman that was involved in that affair at one time, but then she clearly rectified her affairs and made proper what? Tawbah. If she does that, and she stopped that affair, and she's not involved in it at all, and she rectified her affairs with Allah clearly, then that man can what? Marry her. But in that state, before the Tawbah, we said the meaning of the hadith is what? The marriage is invalid if they were to be married together. Is it clear? Also, the last narration we cover is a hadith of our mother Aisha radiallahu anha. A person might ask before we end the lesson, does one love of the hadith, the love of talaq, of divorce, by saying it 3 times? You'll find a lot of Ahl Ilm say it does necessitate what? 1. But the wording is still what? Incorrect. Is it clear? So I wanted to mention that before we end the class. But it's definitely a affair of khilaf. But you'll find a lot of Ahl Ilm that they saying divorcing your wife by saying she's divorced 3 times at the same time, meaning one wording, by saying inti taliq, inti taliq, inti taliq. If you say that, of course, number 1 is not permissible. But in that particular affair, you'll find that Ahl Ilm say that it necessitates what? 1. Even though some khilaf in that. But I tell brothers and I warn them, do not say this and expose yourself to khilaf in regards to these very sacred affairs of marriage, not realizing whether or not you're married to the woman that you sleep with every night. That is very scary and frightening. That you're laying something next to someone, is she still my wife or she's not my wife? Man, you understand, everyone? You don't want to take a risk on these affairs. Very risky and they're extremely dangerous. So if you want to do it, or end or finalize a marriage, do it in the proper way, without being under a state of emotional influence. Walk away, keep your composure, and if things get emotional and they start to now spiral, walk away. Walk away, walk out of the room immediately. Because shaitan, he's quick to utter, to make you say something that will necessitate that you're going to regret it after it happens. And then when you calm down, you'll be like, what did I just do? You understand, everyone? And one of the most efficient ways to break a woman is to mention divorce to her. And it's over. You understand, everyone? As it says in the Prophet, the person saying that, the Prophet mentioned that, which is the Sahihain. He said, فَإِنَّ أَعْوَجَ مَا فِي الضِّلِعِ أَعْلَاهُ وَإِنْ ذَهَبْتَ تُقِيمُهُ كَسَرْتَهُ وَكَسْرُهَا طَلَاقُهَا وَكَسْرُهَا طَلَاقُهَا. He said that the most crooked part of the rib of Adam is the uppermost part, which Hawa was created from, meaning the woman, of course. And if you try to straighten it, you'll break it. And breaking it is divorcing her. Kasruha talaquha. Breaking it is what? Divorcing her. So, like you said, these affairs, especially these days and times where divorce is widespread, and it's very widespread, relationships to shaitan, you can tell he's aiming for the marriages. He's aiming to separate between wives and husbands in these days. You can see it. Because you hear the numerous of complaints. How he's now infiltrating in the marriages and relationships between 2 couples and destroying it. If you see that, and like we said and mentioned, walk away. Walk away, because you might utter something that the shaitan will inspire you to utter, and then when you calm down, you'll severely regret it. So we'll stop here, inshallah. So the last part we ended at is what, everyone? Bab al-Kafa'a. So we'll talk about this next class, because this is also important. Next week we'll cover the chapter of what they call Kafa'a. Al-Kafa'a. Kafa'a means adequacy. To marry someone that is adequate to you. Meaning whether they be kufu lak, diniyan, or iqtisadiyan, or maliyan, or min haythu nasab. Are those agreed upon? Is that a prerequisite or not? All that we'll discuss next class. meaning someone adequate to you, whether they be in lineage, or whether they be in wealth, or whether they be in religion. All of those agreed upon or not, we'll talk about that next class. Some of them are, and some of them aren't. Like, do you need to have compatibility in lineage? Do you need to have compatibility in money? Do you need to have compatibility in religion? Do you have to have compatibility in those affairs? We'll talk about that next class. Like, any questions about the lesson before we stop? Anything? Any questions about the lesson?
Beautiful lesson.
Stop here, inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.